everyone. Welcome back to another episode of ResearchWorks podcast. I am coming to you post-conference from EACD, Galway in Ireland, delivering my usual summary episode as we have done so for all the conferences that we've been to so far. I think some people like to listen to this one first and then they go back and they figure out which episodes are most relevant to them. But it's a really good way, I think, of just putting everything together. And for me, it's been really good to just go through this process to put it all together as well. We recorded something like 25 episodes. So we had a lot of conversations and I've had a lot of thoughts and I think I've compiled them now. So I'm sitting in an apartment in London, thanks to a dear friend of mine, to give me the space to think and to eat some cake. I have bought some cake from Ottolenghi this morning and I'll be having that really shortly. But yeah, stay tuned for this. I think we've got some good ideas to hopefully put together. Before we get too far into this episode though, I do have some thank yous and I also have some questions that people have had for me through the podcast series so far, through the conference that I thought I'd answer as well, seeing this is a bit more of like a monologue style. So firstly, I want to thank the EACD Organisation Committee. Thank you for partnering with ResearchWorks again and wanting to have us there as part of the conference for knowledge translation. It's so amazing to partner with these brilliant organisations from across the globe in an effort to just spread knowledge. So particular thanks to Hazel Colleen, who is the president of EACD 2026 and the chair of the scientific committee, Rory O'Sullivan. And I also want to thank Emma Conlon. She represents a whole team of people that organised the conference. So thank you, Emma, for helping me get set up and answering all my emails as we got things ready. I really want to thank everyone who came by the podcast stand to say hello and for those who stopped me as I was going from place to place to tell me about their story of how the podcast helps them. That was really cool. Carol, a big shout out to you from Ireland if you're listening to this in your long drive. It's just so amazing to meet people who listen. So thank you so very much because the big news around that is the podcast is bigger than it's ever been before, which is so cool for a research-based podcast. In fact, we have just made it into the top 10% of all podcasts globally, which is pretty amazing. Like that's not even just in research or in science. This is just overall podcast. So that's a really huge honor that so many of you guys listen to us and listen to our conversations and contribute. So thank you so much for listening and being part of this amazing community. And I really feel that community every time I come to a conference. Thank you to all those who got me food. On the Thursday of the conference, Ed and I completely forgot to eat. For some reason, I scheduled episodes through the whole day without any breaks. We got to the end of the day and realized we were low in blood sugar and a little bit weary. So thank you for everyone who came by the booth on Friday and Saturday just to give us food. Really grateful for that. And of course, I need to thank Ed for being here and recording all of the episodes. It is no small thing to do this and get them out as quickly as he does. It is pretty incredible. We had a lot of people come by very excited to meet Ed. He was called at one point Voice of God. I don't know how that feels for him. I don't know how that feels for me, Voice of God. And people saying it is the best segment. So there you go, Ed. It's not just about the producing for the podcast. People actually love your contributions as well. There are a few other questions people had, so I want to address these ones first because I think they're really good questions. One of the questions we had was, who do I pick to interview and how do people get onto the show? Really, our main threshold for this is a publication in a peer-reviewed journal and an area of interest, obviously, to pediatrics, child health, childhood-onset disability. That's really important to have that kind of scientific integrity to the paper. So we only talk to people who've published. And in a conference, people who have submitted posters or abstracts, instructional courses. Again, they've all been reviewed by a peer review process of the scientific committee. And that's the threshold. So if there's something that's being published so that people can access, we'll talk about it. And everyone who I spoke to for this conference as well has their abstracts published in the Developmental Medicine Child Neurology EACD series. So there's always something to refer back to. It's not just thoughts about things. It's always grounded in work that's been published. And the other question I got was, how does Healthy Strides do this, or how does ResearchWorks do this? Are we part of a grant? No, we're not part of a grant at all. This was an idea that was started in 2021. And it was really just an idea, it's a bit of a side hustle for myself and Ash, because we were just really interested in communicating research to the general community. And this is what it's developed into. So yeah, we don't have a grant that supports us. We do this because we absolutely love it. We are very fortunate to have the support of Healthy Strides Foundation. It's a not-for-profit organisation in Perth, Western Australia, all the way down the other side of the world from here. And the work that's done at Healthy Strides in providing children with focused, intensive, evidence-based therapy. And it is through that organisation that supports education, and that's what we do here through ResearchWorks. So we're really grateful that Healthy Strides continues to support this initiative. Is this what I do every day? No, it isn't. This is just like I said, a side hustle. It is not my main job. I love this part of my job. But the main important thing from this is my role is clinical lead and CEO of Healthy Strides Foundation. So I founded Healthy Strides in 2018. In fact, the idea and the logo of Healthy Strides was drawn up in 2017 in this very apartment. And this organization is really dear to my heart, co-designed, people of lived experience, and implements everything we learn about in research into everyday practice. So whilst we're in Perth, I also have an establishment in Malaysia, so Healthy Strides Malaysia, and recently in Singapore, so Healthy Strides Singapore. So very busy running 3 organizations, constantly just looking at how we implement research into everyday practice. So hopefully a lot of the conversations that come through really do show how we translate that into everyday life. So for that, I do need to really thank my team back at home at Healthy Strides for keeping everything running, on my clinical leadership team, because it's when I have a great team like that that enables me to come out here and speak to these amazing researchers and share them with you. Last little point, I'm very sorry I didn't bring enough books when I was here. I did write a book. It's called Making Healthy Strides. It's about the origins of how we started everything in the podcast. I've got physical books at home, but we've recorded a podcast for it, which is obviously very free. Everyone can listen to it. I just haven't recorded the linkings between the chapters. So that will be available soon. If you are interested, I'll let you know about that. And for families, I do have a podcast for families where I co-host it with another person, which is a parent. There's a few parents that are involved in this, and it's called Therabytes. It's got a few seasons out, and it's the application essentially of the F words. So hopefully that answered the main questions that I got at this conference. This conference, if you have heard any of the episodes so far, was very much centered on the F words. And I loved at the beginning of the entire conference, Peter Rosenbaum came up and talked about how the F words came about. But he quoted this one line, which was from Christine Innes, and it is being, becoming, and belonging. And that is the essence of everything that we want to try to do for the children, the families that we work with. It's what we want to do as a community of therapists, allied health professionals, medical professionals. It's about being, becoming, and belonging. And I love that when you think about that, Peter Rosenbaum started off by really challenging the tyranny of orthodoxy. Things that have sort of been passed down from generation to generation, these sort of thoughts and ideas that somehow became truth without ever being tested. And so he really put out the call to always challenge and question, because if there is evidence, then the evidence will speak for itself. If there's no evidence, then it's probably time to look elsewhere. I love how he spoke about W-sitting, and W-sitting for so long has been sort of shamed. Children shouldn't be W-sitting. It's really bad for them. And when I saw Peter on the last day, he showed me a photo of the female athlete that won the French Open. And when she won, she fell to the floor to celebrate, and she sat in W-sitting. It just shows that we need to challenge our orthodoxies, and that was really important. So as a profession, this is how we evolve. We need to challenge ourselves, we need to question, we need to study. And obviously the ICF came out in 2001, the formal recognition of participation. It's about recognizing that in a condition, we have all these interacting components, whatever diagnosis the person might have. It's understanding the role of body structure and function, the activities that we do, how it impacts the way we attend and are involved in life situations, and how that's influenced by environmental and personal factors. And we can intervene at any point, and that's really important. And when you're thinking about the F words, it's just a framework, an approach. It's a thinking that brings the ICF to life. And I think what it brings more to life is this whole phrase of being, becoming, and belonging. You know, it's the thinking about the personal factors that influence what we do. And then it's not a checklist. It's an approach. I think the last thing we would want is to see the F word seen as just a checklist of, have we done this? Have we done that? I mean, at least it encourages us to think broader. And I think we need to always zoom out to think about the person and their family, and knowing that we're always looking at the future, because clearly our children grow up to become adults. So really central to all of this is knowing that what we do, therefore, in childhood, and children only have one childhood, is going to impact their adulthood. And I think our role is really just to help them to be set up to live the best possible life that they could ever dream and imagine of. And I think it's really important from at this point to talk about, when we look at the F words, is what is the role of therapy? Because I think it's really easy, if you're just going to focus on the F words, to go, whoa, where do I fit in? Like, where does therapy fit in? Where does medical interventions fit in? It's really easy to make it appear that it doesn't matter. But when there is this interplay between learning skills and how we interact with the real world, like dressing or transferring, navigating uneven surfaces, using a communication device, we want to find the best possible way and path for children to be able to use those skills and use them in real life. We want to make sure they're fit, physically and mentally fit to do so. We want to make sure they're in really good health. We don't want them to be sedentary. We want to make sure they're physically active. So we're thinking about their long-term health. So this, to me, means that therapy has two main roles, two things we need to think about. We need to do the right things so that they're not dependent on the therapy team. We want to basically have an outward approach. We're there to help them to learn how to use those skills. And we want to deliver that with the right amount of focused practice so they can use it in real life. And the side benefit of this is that we're really efficient with time and money. And the F words just keep us really accountable to that. Whether it's medical, orthopedics, botulinum toxin, physio OT, it's not allowing that to become the dominant story, but making sure that that is just part of their story. And if I go through now the people I spoke with, it becomes really clear. So this is why keynote speaker Katrina Williams looks at developmental regression. We want to know what to do as quickly as we can. If we see regression happen, if someone presents to us in our practice, what do we need to do? Well, we need to identify this early and make sure they're referred to the appropriate pathways, because regression is a really challenging time for the child and the family. And so we want to make sure that we're identifying this properly and having the knowledge around this. So developmental regression, Katrina Williams, what an interesting episode. The episode we spoke about with Boomer Aravamutham, who spoke about their instructional course with their team, they're developing an evidence-based, standardized and practical diagnostic framework for cerebral palsy. Again, health equity is really central to this. This work began in 2020, and the team just really have been working through Delphis and co-design to come up with a framework that can be really easily integrated so that doctors at any level can go through this checklist and ensure that the right diagnosis is made in line with the latest description of cerebral palsy. Really, really interesting, really exciting to know that that's happening. Again, making sure that we're sending families on the right path as quickly as possible. Early intervention, great example of that as well. We want to build up our workforce so that they can face this new challenge, as Iona Novak spoke about. We've got early identification now. So there's this whole workforce challenge to make sure that we have the skills to support these children very early. And that's why Cerebral Palsy Alliance have come up with CP Advance, a training course for clinicians to be able to apply evidence-based practices into their everyday, because we want to be efficient with that time. Betty Hutchin is involved with EI Smart, and her team have a suite of online services and resources for clinicians, again, to embed evidence-based practices into every day. What a great resource for clinicians. We spoke to Susan Duff and Theresa Moulton about how we can be creative with low-cost innovations and how that can help children to self-generate and self-initiate their own active movement, because that's really important. We don't want to be part of their solution. If we keep putting our hands on and we're part of their problem-solving solution, we're not being time efficient for children to learn those skills and get out there and do stuff. We are interrupting with that. And that was really, really apparent in this discussion. We spoke with Ros Boyd and Andrea Gazzetta about visible, knowing that we can actually intervene from vision perspective and make sure we're providing the right kind of vision strategies really early on and in the right context, because we know this has a huge impact on cognition, exploration, and engagement of the family. They were really interesting talks about early intervention. Again, all of it's being designed to support clinicians to be efficient with the time that we get really early on and making sure that we're part of the solution, not the solution. Jill Massey, OT out here in the UK, I love how her team are developing social narratives to help children prepare to be ready when they come to their sessions. And again, this art of co-design and these ideas built from families. If children are going to travel a long way to see a health professional, of course you want the child to come to the session ready. So developing social narratives to tell them why they're coming to play, how they're going to play, how long they'll be there to play for, a simple solution to something that will have a really huge effect and something we're thinking about. Love the conversation with Kat Disluva, Eva Pontine, and I did butcher her name on the podcast, I'll try again, Anja van Kampenhuis. There's been a lot of rhetoric online about botulinum toxin, and there's a bit of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. But they came along and say, hey, we've got really good data from what we've done. We don't want to do botulinum toxin on just regular basis, every 3 months, which some centers do. Not even just every 6 months, but looking at when we should be providing more botulinum toxin, giving the muscle enough time to recover will give it its best effect, and starting physical therapies at 6 months instead, because that's when you can really strengthen the muscle. And again, it's just using the services and the time really efficiently, not just doing the intervention for intervention's sake. And they've got some great data about that as well. So really encourage you to look at that. Then I spoke to some orthopedic people. Always interesting to speak to them about this area, because surgery is the big, as David Frumberg said, the big S word. Everyone's quite scared of it. But if we can come up with the right interventions at the right time and then follow it up in the right way, we can be really efficient with time again. Jason Howard spoke about hip-guided growth and an old technique, but now translated to a much younger population that was originally studied, and that's looking like it's got some really great outcomes. And then Nancy Lennon went on to speak about whether muscles really weaken in ambulant children post-surgery, and they don't significantly weaken, but it really highlights the importance of power training. And we've spoken before in the past with Noelle Moreau about power training, and that will be a wonderful combination, a great resource for us to have. And then I spoke to Wade Schrader about looking at respiratory health, something a little bit different coming out of that team. But how interesting to note that, measuring respiratory health is important. And a lot of our children can't do the traditional respiratory assessments because they don't have the lip closure. It's really voluntary. It's very difficult to do, where they've developed a system where it looks like a lie detector test, they said, where you can wrap something around their body and it can measure their work of breathing, and it can differentiate between GMS levels 4 and 5. So watch this space, really interesting again, so that we can be more targeted with our interventions and measure our outcomes. Loved that. And then there was just this evolving work in areas where we're just trying to develop more evidence. And I love this. Again, this is challenging orthodoxies and, whether power of mobility introduced early, is that a good thing or not? Rosalind Livingstone came on and did a scope and review and found that through that scope and review, there's some really positive experiences when you're implementing this really early on. And it has a huge effect on mobility, physical health, emotional health. Challenging the orthodoxy again, you can start this really early. And then Paula Chagas from Brazil showed us a way that you can implement this in a low-cost resource setting. Loved that. And they now have this whole availability of resources for anyone around the world if they want to look into how they can implement these strategies. Parents can do it. Therapists can do it. You can just contact them. So take a look at those links that we put on with that episode. And the whole idea of interdependence. I love that terminology that came out with Rosalind Livingstone. Instead of always talking about independence, which is really quite unattainable for so many people, like you can't just suddenly become independent with power mobility or using like a walking frame, but you can think about interdependence, where you're interdependent on who's around you, but it can still be done with as much autonomy as possible. And that led to the idea of building capacity and participation. And for that, we spoke to Dayna Pool from Canada. And her title was all about building capacity for participation in the real world. And what is building capacity? It's like this ongoing process. It's not just an outcome. It's about creating agency. And that agency is developed from past and current experiences. And I love that terminology of agency because that is how you can support participation in their own natural environment. It's a strengths-based approach. Agency is also about problem solving. It's thinking about your own solutions. And again, that might be interdependent, but you still have that autonomy and that little bit more control in your own world. I really, really love that notion. And Dayna really highlighted how important it is to look at, if we're going to set people up for participation in the real world, we have to set everyone up. Like I think we think about the child a lot, how we set them up, the family, but actually it's teams, it's organizations, it's environments. And that's what Nora Shields did. And she won an award for what she's been doing. Nora Shields presented on fit skills and physical activity adaptations with peer mentorship. And that's gone through a whole series of about 10 years now. Started from an honours project, went into a randomized controlled trial, then went into an implementation phase, which then allows it to be translated into a real world and now scalable and self-sustaining. What a wonderful example of building capacity in different organizations and spaces and making something so evidence-based available. And to that end, I really love how Rycliffe, I can't say your surname, Schlomoris. It is German, and I don't think I can say that properly. So sorry, Rycliffe. I need to go back to that. So great to have a teacher wanting to do his PhD in a program called MOVE. And the reason why I love this conversation so much is not just because MOVE sounds really good. I love it because it was developed in the 1990s and it's got a lot of merit with regards to how it can be integrated with goals in a school-based setting, but there hasn't been much research done in it. So instead of just accepting it as a good idea, Rycliffe and his team are actually going to develop the evidence for it. How fantastic is that? Again, making sure that we're not just saying something looks good, but actually testing it out. I think that's going to be really exciting. What a great initiative and really humbling to see someone go in to study something, even though it's been around for a long time, but really challenging it and making sure that there is an evidence base behind it before we start recommending, because there is a lot of that. Another theme that came up a lot of was the use of neuroplasticity words in common everyday. Who would have thought 20 years ago that we're all talking about neuroplasticity and all the elements that include neuroplasticity, but it can be misappropriated. And that was a really common theme, and a lot of concern from a lot of our research community and from families. And so for that, it was wonderful to speak to Alvaro Hidalgo Robles from Spain on a term called neurowashing. What an interesting term. It's all about how neuroplasticity words are being marketed and misappropriated. And that marketing has really damaging effects when families are really looking for something that is evidence-based. You include the words like neuroplasticity or time, specification, intensity, reflex integration. They're all just very neuro words. But how do you know they're actually good words used in the right context? And this team have come up with a good checklist for us to review it for families and clinicians called HYPE. Really interesting, and I think it's really important, and it's become very topical, obviously, with social media really demonstrating a lot of this as people are promoting their services. And all of this comes from a foundation of setting the appropriate goals and ingredients to them. And it was wonderful seeing Child here, really a huge presence here. And I spoke to Rachel Toplicki and Hercules Lecce, and of course, Peter Rosenbaum, where we talked about the F Words Lens tool. And it just gives us a language to make sure that we're on the right path in combination with the families and talking about the things that really matter to them. And the Lens tool is just another resource you can get from the website. It's free. You can do that together and have a template that you can work through together. And that common language can help us to work with the families so that we are looking at what these words are and what they actually mean and bring it back to this child and make sure that we're thinking about this child and their family. And it was really interesting, though, on the flip side to all of that, talking to Carolina Fioroni Ribeiro da Silva. I think I said that right. And she's looking at the poor uptake of free parent programs in Germany. And it was really interesting. They had really poor uptake in all free programs they're offering to over 6,000 families. And one of the reasons these programs are not taken up, despite good feedback that the programs are really good, was that the programs, people weren't interested on the outlook. And I think that speaks to how we communicate. As a research community, as clinicians or evidence-based, we are competing with quite a saturated market out there. We need to be able to tell our story in a far better way. We need to think about the contemporary modalities of how we're communicating. And we need to be part of that. We need to be on the social media platforms also communicating this too, because we need to cut through the noise. And I guess the question is, how do we do that? And that's when I spoke with Brian Hoare, and we're sitting there thinking about the conference. And, the conference sometimes can feel like a bubble. We're preaching the converted. Everyone here is supportive. Everyone here is on board. But what about out there? What about the families? What about the therapists that haven't come to this conference? What can we do? And how can we support these ideas to be more widespread? Because after all, it's becoming, it's belonging. They're really big, important things for children. So to do this, I thought I'd talk a little bit about how I integrate this in Healthy Strides. I don't want to sound like I'm someone that just talks about it. I'm someone that wants to talk about it and do it. And the team at Healthy Strides know that when I go into the podcast studio, by the time I come out, I've spoken to someone, it's a great idea. We're going to fine tune, we're going to tweak something that we do to make sure we're always in line. And by the time I go to a conference and I've spoken to like 25 people, I come back with many more ideas. But I thought I'd share something that we do at Healthy Strides and the frameworks that we use and how we actually implement all of this in. So every time there's new information that comes in, it just does a fine tweak to this overall framework. The first thing I'll point out to say is that we have really valued the role of communication. What's really apparent through a lot of things that we discuss is that it's the soft skills that matter. I saw a post that someone put out from the conference, and it was titled, "Communication is Clinical Care." They say that acknowledging the words are not neutral. They can either widen or shrink the future a family can imagine. It's because our words matter. Our words have a lasting impact. You only need to talk to a family that said, a doctor or therapist said this on part of their journey, and it influenced the whole path they went down. Whether they wanted to prove them wrong or they thought that there was no hope unless they worked really hard at it. Our words have meaning, and they may not have been intended that way, but the result of it can really influence someone's life. And so I've really recognized that as therapists, we're not really trained to tackle these kinds of conversations. We're trained to be clinicians. We're trained with ideas and techniques, but we're not trained with how to best communicate. And so what we've done at Healthy Strides is we've intentionally got someone on our team that supports our team with their communication skills. So this is Alison Passeur, shout out to Ali. Her role is to support our team on having these active listening conversations and our ability to be resilient in those conversations and how we're actually taking what they've said and turn it into a strengths-based conversation. Because the last thing we want to do is for the F words or setting goals to be just a tick boxing exercise. It is not. It is something that we do in collaboration, but it can feel like a tick boxing exercise when you've got a form that you want to fill out. So how do we do that? We have someone that supports our team with that skill. And look, you might be in an organization where that's not available, or you're a sole provider and that's not possible. I would say go and invest into it. Look into courses that you can do either online. There's plenty of management courses actually that talk about how to have challenging conversations, our active listening skills. Those skills that I taught in corporate world and how to build teams are really important, and they're transferable into our area. And then some might say, hey, look, we're not an organization like Healthy Strides. Well, I would also say Healthy Strides, we're not a massive organization. We're a not-for-profit. We're relatively small, and we're not funded by the government. We don't have any grant funding for this, so to speak. We provide a service, and we make sure the service is evidence-based, and that's how we make sure that we have something that is sustainable as well. So it's just something that we've valued because it's so important for us. And so I would just really encourage you to look at courses that you can do that and really advocate with your organization to be supported in your communication. So that's the first thing that I will say. The next thing that I would say is, how do we explain the therapy that we do? What is our language? What is really clear here is that with all of this evidence that is around, how do we succinctly communicate this with our families, with other clinicians? And in my conversation of Jeannie Palig, she was really big at talking about the ingredients, but also the mechanism. What is the mechanism of action? So one, we should be asking what the evidence is, but what is the mechanism of that? But clearly, how do we communicate this? Communicating evidence-based practice, I'm really sorry, it is not sexy. Say to someone, oh, I provide evidence-based therapy. It doesn't sound that great. We know it's the right thing to do, but it doesn't sound that good. So how do we actually do this? Do I say to people, these are the green light interventions? Well, to a family, what does that mean? Like Peter Rosenbaum said, we have the textbooks, the families have the stories. So we can't just keep bringing to them our terminology and try to market that as a green light intervention. That is very therapist speak. So for that reason, at Healthy Strides, we have developed a framework that helps us to communicate the mechanisms of action. And it provides my therapist with a way of being able to communicate what we do as well. And it's called the START framework. You'll find it on our website, healthystridesfoundation.com. We have a whole page on it. But essentially, it's how we will communicate and how we think about what it is we provide. And it is evidence-based practice into this framework. So it starts with something, of course. So S is self-initiated. As we have heard endlessly through what we know is the most modern forms of neuroplasticity, is that it has to be self-initiated. It means the person who wants to do a task is initiating the task. They're not initiating it in response to someone's hands on them. It is self-generated. So it could be taking steps in a walker. The mechanism of this is the child is planning the movement. They're executing the movement. They will make an error, but they will problem solve. It is part of agency. Self-initiation gives agency because it is all about this problem solving through the process within the context. So self-initiated movement is so important when we're talking about building capacity. And it really distinguishes from these hands-on approaches where our hands are part of the solution. I'm not saying you can never have your hands on someone. You might show, you might facilitate with prompts, but to do the actual task, they have to practice it in a self-initiated way. That is the mechanism of action. So we can talk about that with many things, like a power wheelchair. Are they initiating the task themselves? If you want them to do a transfer, are they actually initiating that particular task themselves? You can talk about this really practically. The next one after S for self-initiated is T for task specific. So task specificity is about how we address the goal directly in its way. So if you want to walk fast, you've got to practice walking fast. If you want to work slow, you have to walk slow. You have to practice the task in its fullest form. And this has to be what they can do for themselves. You've got to practice it how you intend for the child to do it. So if you intend the child to always stand with your hands all over them, then you practice standing with someone's hands all over them. If you want to practice walking with someone constantly taking steps for you, then that's what you practice. Does that mean they can take the steps themselves, or does that mean they can actually stand themselves? It doesn't. It is the task specificity of it is how you want them to do it. It's making sure we don't break down the task in too small of the part so that it doesn't make sense anymore. You have to practice it in its fullest context. And that can look different for every single child. So when you do this, you get A for accelerated learning. Now, accelerated learning is an interesting one because it's more about rest and recovery. It's about being smart with our intensity. It's not about the maximum amount of therapy. It's about the optimal amount of therapy. It's being smart with that. So it's giving time for skills to generate, giving time for the child to actually learn. It's seeing therapists every other day rather than every single day. So what we do at Healthy Strides is we're very focused. Children come to see us 3 times a week over the course of 6 weeks. Each session is usually only about an hour. And we do this because we've been measuring the intensity for our children to achieve their goals. And as I presented at this conference, it takes a median of 11 sessions or 11 hours for our children to start to achieve their goals. But if their GMS is level 5 and a CFCS level 5, it looks more like 16 sessions as a median. So it's knowing the right dosage with the right rest and recovery phases that is really important, because you want the child to actually practice it in their home context as well. It's not just about doing it in the one setting and thinking it's going to translate. Accelerated learning happens when you are practicing something, but you're relaying it contextually. So R stands for real world application. Again, you've got to practice it the way you want to do it in real life. So the context is important, the scaffolding is important, prompting is important. If you want the child to be able to do this with just supervision, they have to practice it in real life with just supervision. They can't just do it with someone's hands on them or with constant verbal prompting. So this is another way we can communicate how we prompt and how we scaffold and the context of which we provide it in. And finally, T is for transformation. And I describe this one as about being joyful. This is being, becoming, and belonging. This is where the skills you have learnt have to be useful to allow our individual, our young person, to live the life that they want to live. This is participation. This is getting rid of the idea of no pain, no gain. This is fun. This is what motivates the child. As we said before, fun doesn't mean it's easy. It just means we're enjoying the journey. This is about the personal factors. It's really challenging the orthodoxies. It is about looking at the F words in its truest form. So I can adapt this START framework in a conversation about just about anything that is evidence-based, whether it is using a power chair, like I said before, whether it is learning a new skill. These principles are really important because they incorporate the F words and the mechanism and the action, as well as the right dosage. And it just provides a really good framework for discussions. And I hope that helps you, because it's really about how it fits. Like, START has to fit within a family's life. It's not about how a family's life needs to fit into the medical interventions, the therapy interventions. And when you have a framework like START, it all just makes more sense. It's valuing the time that they have with you. It's making sure that we have the right amount, but doing the right kinds of things so we can send children along the way. It's valuing the role of therapy and therapists in providing the right kind of interventions at the right kind of time. It values the skill sets of therapists to know how to communicate well with families, to come up with really strengths-based goals. And I think if we can do that, we know that we're implementing the best practice. So what did I take from conference? I think we need to implement more. We have to communicate more. We have the knowledge now, but we need to communicate this in an individualized way. So I hope that the framework start helps you, but it's not like we don't have the knowledge now. We have to implement. We have to do the doing. And that part really comes down to our ability to communicate this well. I hope that's useful for you. I hope that brings together all of the ideas. I hope this helps you to prioritize which episodes you want to listen to as you go back into the series. Thank you once again for listening. Thank you for listening to me in the summary episode. I know it's just my voice. You don't get the joy of listening to Ed's voice or Ash or Marissa. But know that we will come back with so many more episodes. We've got a great lineup. We have so many things available for you to use. So look, ResearchWorks Academy. So if you head to researchworks.academy, you have a whole suite of resources there. We'll update them with EI Smart and CanChild and places where you can find all the information in one place. There's GAS templates there to help you with writing your GAS, decision trees. There's a lot of resources there that you can use in one place. We also have our courses available. We're actually going to have a lot more courses available soon. So I think we've got about 6, courses available. There's 2 that have just dropped. One is from Anne-Christian Eliasson, which is all about early development of upper limb use. It is a great course that she's put together there. Jeannie Paleg and Rosalind Livingstone put together one all about postural management. A really good one if you're looking on how you can implement more of this postural management skills into your practice. We're going to have more on neuroplasticity coming out. We've got some on START coming out. And we'll also have things on FES, more on upper limb training and supported stepping devices. So I hope that's going to be a useful site for you. Head to researchworks.academy. We'll see a whole list of all of our episodes there as well. But I think for now, I'm going to go and enjoy some cake. I bought lots of cake from Ottolenghi, more than I can probably manage, but I'm going to give it a really good go. We'll talk to you again in a few weeks. We'll have a bit of a break now as everyone digests all of these episodes. But we'll talk to you all again really soon. Goodbye.